Right now, we're going to take a few minutes to talk about how to nail your next executive presentation. What are the things you have to do to feel good before, during, and after to know that you got the message through that you needed to get through and left a positive impression? Hi, I'm Mike Lafferty, founder of Jaloa Improvement Partners. And this is a Mike's Management Minute, where what we do is discuss the issues, concerns, and questions that have come up when I'm coaching the leaders that I have the privilege to talk with. So in the executive presentation, the first thing you have to think about is why are you there? And really the reason you're there is to help your boss do his job or to help the leadership team accomplish whatever they're trying to accomplish. It's not about you in any way. And that's an important factor to keep in mind. So in that, we have to think about who's the audience? What do we know about them? Or maybe what do we not know about them? But considering those things is very important. So the first question is, what are they responsible to do every day? Are they managing finance? Are they managing operations? Are they in marketing and sales? You have to think about these things and what matters to them most in doing those. As well, the human resources of the business and the capital to run it and all the other considerations. What are they thinking about? On what basis are they evaluated by their boss? Maybe their boss is a CEO, maybe their boss is the board of directors, maybe their boss is somebody at headquarters. But think about what are they considering as far as how they're being evaluated. It's very important to get to these key motivations. And what decisions do they need to make? They're getting information from you for some reason. It's usually not just because they're curious. They have to run a business. So what are they thinking about the business? What are they thinking about the products in the marketplace? About operations and sales and service? What are the considerations in terms of human resources, finances, cash flow? What are they thinking about now? What are they thinking about for the long term? What are the considerations that they are most interested in when you're presenting? What are the questions in the back of their mind? What are the things that they're trying to manage? What questions would you be asking if you had that responsibility? If you were running the business yourself, what would you need to know from the person in your role? That's the things you need to think about as you're preparing. The other thing to consider is what is the individual or team's primary motivation? And this is tricky on teams because you may have multiple players. But are they motivated about power and accomplishment? What's the culture of the business? Or what's the drive of the individual? Are they motivated toward recognition, or are they concerned and fear about job security? Are they interested in accuracy, or are they interested in vision? What are the things that they're most considerate of? Do they prefer to dwell in details, or are they interested in the high-level thoughts, just going over the top? All of these things need to be considered. Are they more optimistic or pessimistic? That affects how you present. What's their comfort zone? Where did they come from? Are they from technology or finance or marketing and sales, operations, human resources? What is their background and where's the areas where they feel the most attached or the most comfort zone? And then how will you tailor your presentation to either hit those topics or perhaps avoid them if you don't want to dwell in too much detail? So think about all these things about the audience you're presenting to. That's key first off. The other thing is to consider the many facets of whatever topic or decision they're making. They have to consider all the business elements, long-term, short-term, all the things I mentioned, technology, finance, market strategy, their own personal gain, the gain of the overall company, what their bosses think about. In all those factors, your presentation has to consider in what information you give them or what information you don't give them, or in what form you give the information. If you're not addressing the questions they have or the issues they're managing, you're wasting their time and they're not going to like it. One thing you have to keep in mind that's really key. It's not about you. There's no goal to impress them. There has to be no goal to show them that you know all about a thing or anything like that. You've got to leave your ego out. It's all about making them successful in how they run their business. Just because you know a bunch of stuff doesn't mean they need to hear about it. They'll be more impressed if you help them run the business and help them answer the questions they have and make the decisions they make than to find out how knowledgeable you are in your subject. Another element in terms of that is to keep your conclusions and recommendations to the end. If you come in first with an opinion or a conclusion before you've brought some others along with the information that you use that help you come to your conclusions or your opinions, you could get yourself trapped. What you'd really ideally like to have is you'd like to have them come to the conclusions that you have. Make it their idea. Make it so that as you lead them through the factual discussion and the information, they come to the same conclusion. That would be the ultimate way to have influence and persuade the leaders that you work for. Be careful not to set up a right and wrong or a win-lose situation where you get yourself cornered. If it's a win-lose and you're on the losing side, if you disagree, it's a bad thing. Allow lots of factors to be considered that are beyond your understanding. Perhaps you make a recommendation. Perhaps you do propose something. You've got to leave outs for yourself and for the others that there could be something beyond what we're talking about in the room or beyond your current knowledge that allows you to save face. Everyone needs to be respected and allowed to save face. Be sure you don't set up an argument because it won't help you in any way. I suggest you use the rules of semantics very carefully, and we can cover that at another time. We'll have another topic series on semantics. But the things you want to avoid are two-valued logic versus multi-valued. Right, wrong, yes, no, good, bad. Those are things to avoid in an executive presentation. Share facts and numbers, variable information at the right level of detail. Another thing to be careful about is using language of affection in the wrong place when it could be language of report, especially as you're bringing people along before you get to conclusion or before you get to final output. You'd like to stay in the language of report. And near the end, when you've gotten all your facts and information out, that's when you can get passionate and use your language of affection. Another element to be careful about is removing inference and judgment. If you apply judgment to a thing that says something's good or bad in your opinion too early, it can be a problem. It's best to stay away from that. As well, inference, which is making statements about the unknown based on what you know. It's better to avoid inference and judgment when you're presenting to an executive, at least in the early stage, when you're just trying to bring them along. And of course, one of the biggest issues, a thing that's a frequent trap, is to be at the wrong level of abstraction. You have to think about all the topics that these leaders are dealing with, all the different peers of yours and the other business units and the other locations, the other product lines, the other facilities and departments, whatever it is. They've got a lot going on. So if you take them down to some minute level of detail right off the bat, you're probably going to have a problem. One is that they may not understand, but they'd be too embarrassed to say so. And that's not good, to put them in a situation where they don't understand and they're embarrassed. Or the other thing is they'll get bored and they won't pay any attention. So what you need to do is make sure that you start at the level of abstraction they're at. Find out what's going on at the high level. Make sure you connect with them, and then you work your way down as necessary, layer by layer, only as deep as is necessary to get the points across. And again, as you do that, you're staying factual as much as possible. You really need this to be fact-based. So you're looking for the logical links of facts. You don't necessarily have to show them all the numbers, but you can show them summarizations of numbers and charts and graphs that describe these things at a higher level of view. They only need the information that they need in order to make a decision and drive the business. They don't need the level of understanding you have. That's why they have you, is to watch the details. So make sure you're at the right level of abstraction. And of course, be ready with your backup information that if someone has a question and they decide to drill down to deeper details, you're ready and you're prepared. So let's get into some details of actually how to build the presentation. First of all, I suggest using an agenda. You need to bring people along with you. Now this sounds interesting because you're most likely in a meeting that has an agenda, but in your presentation specifically, maybe you have 12, maybe you have 20 PowerPoint slides or something like that. Put an agenda in that says, here's what I'm going to talk about. 1, 2, 3, 4. Doing a little introduction like that, even if you only have 10 minutes in front of someone, is very, very valuable. I recommend it highly. So they know where you're going and they can stay with you. It keeps them from drilling down on small topics that are less important than the big ones that you have. And it also allows you to remain in control of the information flow. So let's say you're making a proposal. You're going to do a proposal. You need to have the background information, the facts critical to the business decision making at a high level of abstraction, but overall some background. Then the problem statement. What problem are you solving? Objectives, clear objectives of what the proposal will achieve. Findings, alternatives to make sure that they know you've done your work to look at the various options. What were the trade-offs as you looked at those things? Consequences of taking action A or action B. And then finally, after you've shared these things as objective factual discussions, then you can have your recommendation and conclusions. And of course, always when making a proposal, list the assumptions. There are things that you don't know. You need to get those things down. There are things you don't know, and you certainly have to get those things down. So that's how we take on a proposal. What about a project update? Now this is a different method, a different type of output. This presentation is to get them up to speed and help them run the business. It does have decision-making consequences, but it in itself is often not a key decision-making point. First of all, you always want to remind them of the project goal with the metrics you're using to measure the success of that and when the target date will be met. When is this project to be done? So you want to clearly state, what did you want to end up with? Now that may sound funny because this is obviously a very important project, and for you it's probably right in front of your business. However, you don't know how many other projects these senior executives are running. And why leave them not clear? You want to start off with a very succinct statement of the project goal to make sure we're all calibrated on what we're talking about. Then you need to talk about the actual performance. We had planned to be at X, Y, Z in this cost. What has actually been performed? We are at this state. These tasks are completed. These ones are not. This is how much money we spent. This is how much we budgeted. Those kinds of conversations. A summary of the completed means to getting to the end of the project. A status of in process or incomplete focused means. A summary of the deselected things that were taken out of the project, and an all factual statement that has no interpretation. No language of affection. This is just the facts, ma'am. Then you want to talk about the status. Now, sometimes it's not obvious from those factual descriptions of where we are what the actual status is. The status is with respect to the original plan. Are we on track? Are we late? Did we have to change our whole game? That's the status. Then the next one is the concern level. Now this is where you get into your opinion. How concerned am I? They need to know that, because if you're close to it and you're really worried, they need to be worried, etc. And then what's the trend? Maybe we were behind in our statement of where we are, but it's getting better and they don't need to worry about it. So the status, concern, trend elements are very, very important in helping executives understand where you are. They're all asking, what's the status, what's the concern, what's the trend? And then if in the reality the project is behind or having some problems, you need to go into a weakness analysis. You need to list the obstacles to completion. and the root causes of those things. What exactly is the process issue or the constraints, the cause of the constraints that are causing us to not be on track if we're behind? The question is, why haven't you got what you wanted and when you wanted it? And then the next thing you must show in a project update, and this is very important, is what are the corrective action plans? What do you expect in the future? What are the specific plans with the who, the what, the when, to address those root cause issues that led to us being behind plan or behind schedule if we were? Now, if you cover those topics, what's the goal? How do I measure it? Where am I actually factually in those measurements? What's the status, the concern, the trend? What went wrong? What are the weaknesses? And what am I doing about those? And when will it be better? If you answer those questions, you've covered everything that most executives need to know about a project. And you'll probably have very few questions, and they will feel very sure that you know what you're doing. The other element that I want to cover, another key agenda that's often an executive presentation, is that of problem solving. Oftentimes we're giving an update on problem solving. And in this, we need to use similar pattern to the one I just described for the project update, but it's a little more nuanced. First of all, the problem statement needs to be made clear and succinct. How many of them were there? Where were they? What's the impact to the company? Etc. And it should be numerical. It should be specific. And in that, you want to describe in that problem where in the process is this, so that they have a clear view of the problem that's the same as yours, and it's not based on somebody called somebody and it's anecdotal information, but factual measured information makes it so much better to have a problem statement that everyone can look at and agree to. Then the next thing is, what is the highest impact that we're trying to control? What effect is causing the problem that we need to manage? Now, once that's understood, oftentimes you'll also come in with a description of a containment action. Once we've identified the problem and we understand what it is specifically we're trying to stop from happening, we should stop it by containment action. That's a short-term thing that we would use to make sure that the symptom is covered. But then we would go into this presentation where we would talk about the root cause. Establish a cause and effect relationship between what's causing it and the symptoms that we're seeing, and show that it's not just managing a symptom that we're doing. We're trying to get to the real root issue that will give us a permanent solution. The last thing any executive wants to see is something where we've got a solution that was put in place, something we called a solution, but all it did was contain a symptom temporarily. So you want to get into what are the root cause issues, and then you can move into solutions. What are the potential applied solutions we might use? When might we have those cut in place and implemented? And then how will we confirm the results? And then what are the recommended next steps? So those are 3 different things that I've described: how to do a proposal, how to do a project update, and how to discuss a problem that you're in the process of problem solving. Now, all this content I've got on a Mind Manager map that you can use. I'll send it to you so you can use that. There's a lot here, and I recognize that maybe some of it was lost in the shuffle. So I'll send you that as well. You can just reach out to me, mike@jiloa.com, if you'd like to have that content. And that's it for executive presentations. And I'll be excited to hear about how you're going to nail your next executive presentation. Thanks so much.